All right, so we are on episode 12. Yep, yep.
Okay, episode 12.
So you got any updates for anybody?
Well, I do have one thing to talk about that happened this week. A couple of months ago, I had a colonoscopy and an endoscopy at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because I was dealing with some really bad heartburn and a hemorrhoid. And I was referred to a gastroenterologist who wanted to do testing. And they found polyps in my colon, which is not normal for someone who's 32. So
Right.
they sent them out to the lab. I mean, they would send polyps out to the lab no matter how old you are, but I digress. They I had my follow-up appointment and they had the results from the testing of the polyps, and some of those polyps were cancerous.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't. I was kind of on like like back and forth about talking about it on here, but I feel like it's important to raise awareness to like how like take care of yourself and have these important annual appointments like your colonoscopy if your doctor recommends it, or
Yeah,
what, and pay attention to your body and listen to it, because if
we're
I had waited to have a colonoscopy until I was 45, I would have had like metastasized cancer,
right.
and it would have probably been too late.
Yeah, we're only in our early 30s, so for it to have already been present is kind of scary.
Yeah, so I've been reflecting on a lot of things, and it's kind of really fucked with my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't really talked to you about it other than telling you. I don't
Right.
know how you've been feeling about it.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it hasn't been on the forefront of my mind in the last week, but honestly, the concern of whether I'm going to lose you too soon, we're all going to die eventually, but hopefully at any time soon, that's that's always a concern. It is always a concern. And the more the more you come home with news from a doctor of, you got to switch medications because of this or something like that, and then to have this come up, yeah, it's scary. It's 100% scary, and all I can hope for is that we can prevent it somehow. Take the advice of a doctor and do what's needed for your bodily health to so you're around. Because listen, my biggest fear in the world is to die alone, and God damn it, you're not dying before me, all right?
Listen, you're not also not allowed to die before me, so if one of us is dying, it's just we kill each other. How about that? Is that fair?
We're moving to Colorado. All right,
Okay.
got it.
Anyway, I do have some disclosures this time. This story is really heavy, and it involves racism, spousal abuse, sexual abuse, violence, child abuse, bestiality, and pedophilia.
Whoa!
So
All right, this is
buckle
gonna
up.
this is gonna be a hell of a story.
I
Well,
don't know if you have anything that you wanted to talk about before we get into the story.
um, I actually only have a quick update. Well, I guess you could say I have two, but I have not been on a very good mental health week, and it has definitely made this weekend one of the roughest we've had in a while, and it is primarily my fault. Um,
Well, I mean, to be fair, the last thing you want when you're overstimulated and overtired and overworked and just had enough with the world is to be around a 18-month-old and a 4-year-old,
yeah,
whether they're as unruly as our children or not.
yeah,
Our
we've
kids are just very defiant, and
we've gotten into the phase
they
that I'm going to argue everything you say. It doesn't matter whether it's literally, hey,
the sky is blue.
Yeah.
But anyway, they're defiant and they get it honest from
Oh,
us,
yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with being defiant. It's
No.
just using that outlet in the appropriate way.
Yeah.
And they're not there yet, so
Yeah.
we're working on it. And
No, I've just, yeah,
Stewart's patience was just as thin as it possibly could be this weekend, and sometimes that happens.
it does. But I'm working on it. And for anybody who's going to suggest therapy, listen, I don't have money, I don't have time, I don't have the resource to go to therapy currently. So that's not currently an option.
But it's something that we're going to be working towards eventually.
Yeah, eventually. The only other update real fast is that we have a final update on the Charger, the car. It is officially totaled as of last Monday, and I was given 7 days to clean it out and have it prepared, because apparently in the state of New York, they come get the car when you when you total it. Didn't know that, because I was thinking, hey, we could sell it for scrap metal afterwards. Nope.
Nope.
As far as my segments of our episode, all I can really say about it, without giving it away, is that it is semi-politically based, and I hate discussing political opinions, but there was a reason for this, and we'll get there. You'll see. All right. So, what story do you have for us this week?
I have the Yahweh. Can't say it. There's a lot of that word in this. I better get prepared.
Yahweh?
Yes, the Yahweh Cult of Nebraska. Not to be confused with the Yahweh Cult in Florida that is kind of blowing up right now, or at least when I typed in Yahweh, that's what came up abundantly. I'll have to look into that one, but this one's in Nebraska.
Okay.
So Michael Ryan, born August 3rd, 1948, from Anthony, Kansas.
Okay.
Oldest of 5 children. His mother's name was Elsie and his father's name was Gene. My dad's name too.
Yeah.
It was said they fought a lot, and those fights were physical, and they fought in front of the children. So not a great upbringing.
No, but it's a tale of the times.
Yeah, he wasn't a good student. It wasn't due to lack of intelligence, because he could do the work. It was due to lack of care. Like, he just didn't want to go to school.
Oh, okay.
When he was really young, he was on a hunting trip with his father and grandfather. Something happened while he was sitting holding a shotgun, and he accidentally shot himself in the foot and lost his first and second toes.
Oh.
So, trauma-ish, yes.
Right.
Yeah. He made it to senior year of high school, thought he was going to graduate, but he ended up not having enough credits, so he actually never finished school.
Huh. All right.
He had dreams of being in the military and being a pilot. So once he realized he wasn't going to actually finish school, that's like pretty much what he did. He made it to the physical portion of enlisting when the doctor discovered he had one undescended testicle.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
He said it really didn't cause him any pain, and that was it, and the doctor didn't say anything. So he left that day thinking that he was going to go into the military.
Yeah, I can tell you right now, he was wrong.
Then one day he got a letter in the mail stating that he'd been classified as something called a 1Y. Yep. So, like, basically he could be called upon during war times, but he was not let into the military. Is that what that is?
I am currently a 1Y.
Yes, I think I remember you saying that. That's why I didn't actually leave an explanation, because I knew you would talk about it.
Yeah. So for those who are unaware, when you are discharged or going in, you're deemed with a code that defines your eligibility for enlistment. And in this 1Y case, what it is that you have the ability to serve if needed during like a draft or whatever. However, they can't use you on a day-to-day basis.
Why the undescended testicle? Like, what does that keep him from doing? That's what I didn't know.
So you run an ass load in
Okay.
training, okay? An undescended testicle will rupture.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And in my case, I have, oh God, it's called ITBS, friction syndrome. Basically, my tendons are fucked up in my left leg, and I also have a partially fake hip that makes me uneligible to serve on a day-to-day basis. However, not uneligible to serve
In wartime.
in wartime.
In like desperate need.
In desperate need. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so he was livid, pissed. He felt like he was lied to.
Feel that.
Around this time, he met his future wife, Ruth.
Okay.
Ruth was actually 3 years younger than him and was still a sophomore in high school when they met.
Okay.
Mike love bombed the shit out of Ruth, telling her everything she ever needed. And Ruth was vulnerable at the time because, you know, she was a child still.
Oh. Yeah.
You see her and her family were not actually from Anthony also, and just recently moved to town from a nearby city called Bluff City. So she just moved.
Right.
Because her mom had cancer and her doctor was in Anthony. Then her mom died shortly after the move. Oh. Then she got mono, like right after that. And that all happened right before they met. So she was going through like a really rough time.
She was going through it, that's for sure.
He would say things like, I can't imagine a life without you. Just really laying that shit on thick. I say that to you, but I don't feel like I do love bomb you sometimes.
Yeah, especially when you want to, like, you know, bring home an extra cat.
Yeah, but we're working on it. Like, I'm not abusive.
No.
Well, Mike had a bad reputation around town for being a little shit who commits petty little crimes. And Ruth's dad knew about them.
Oh, boy.
And Ruth's dad wanted her to have nothing to do with him.
Right.
But you know how teenage girls are, though. So they ran away to Oklahoma to get married.
Yeah. Okay.
But they didn't really look into things there. They were told they couldn't get married without parental consent because Ruth was only 16.
Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of just taking the L and going home with their tails between their legs, they decided to go on the run. And that went okay for a bit, for about 6 months. And then one day some officers noticed them just hanging out at a park and noticed out-of-state license plates and how young they looked. And the jig was up. Yeah. And back to Kansas they went. But they got married about 6 months later in Kansas. Ruth was 17 and Mike was 21.
Okay.
This put a rift in Ruth's relationship with her dad. They pretty much cut ties, and sadly her dad died shortly after they got married.
Oh.
So she literally only has her husband now.
That's
I didn't see anything about siblings, but I didn't really look into it.
Right.
So they go on to have 3 kids, 2 boys and 1 girl.
Okay.
Dennis, Alvin, and Mandy.
Okay.
So like a lot of families, Mike is really struggling to financially provide for all these damn kids.
Don't we know it? We only got 2.
Well, a big part of the money problems, Mike really struggled with keeping a job.
Oh.
Mike would get these jobs because he had this great charm about him.
Yeah.
But it would never last. He always had issues with management and like would not get along with people.
I feel that.
But Mike does finally a job that works for him.
Okay.
Truck driving.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
Mike the dickhead was also cheating on Ruth constantly, having affairs. And he didn't even try to hide it, according to some of her stories.
Good grief.
So Mike also was physically abusing Ruth.
Whoa.
And at least the oldest son, Dennis. The other 2 kids never came forward with information confirming abuse, but the oldest son does.
Oh, man.
Well, Mike really loved trucking. It was the perfect setup. He didn't have a boss breathing down his neck all day. He could be with a different woman in a different city every night. His wife none the wiser, just him in the road.
Oh, God. Can I tell you that he is the reason why truckers have a stereotype? Literally. I hate that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it came to a crashing halt when one day he was putting a tarp onto the back of his truck
Okay.
I'm assuming he like had a flatbed
Yep.
because that's what.
He's tarping a load. He's
Yeah.
a flatbedder.
Yeah. So when a big gust of wind blew the tarp up and took him with it, and he like flew really high into the air.
Oh yeah, that'll happen.
He fell and landed on his back and ended up needing surgery.
Mm.
And well, that put him out of work for about 8 months.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah. During this time, he starts to habitually smoke marijuana, which,
Yeah.
according to Ruth's testimony, causes his mood to be worse.
Okay.
Is what I read. I think maybe he was just a shit human being to begin with, marijuana or no marijuana, but I do know that like there are certain people that any drug makes them a worse person.
Either that, or it diminishes your
Your care,
yeah,
your
it allows
inhibitions.
I was gonna say it allows basically your desires to come forthright.
So Ruth makes a friend, a single mom with 3 kids. Ruth has 3 kids, so they have, or yeah, Ruth has 3 kids, so they have something in common. Her name's Janet Carter.
Okay.
They got really close, and the kids got along and played together.
Play dates.
Yeah, from the beginning, Mike was pretty upfront about his interest in Janet. As we know, he doesn't really care about cheating on his wife.
Oh, God.
So
Yep.
he suggests a threesome, of course.
Ugh.
Ruth wasn't really down for it, but she's afraid of her husband, so she agreed. And surprisingly, Janet went for it too. So they ended up entering into a throuple, and the whole fam moved in with Janet.
Okay.
Which quickly turned sour. Since they were living together, Janet got to see what Mike was like to his wife and kids behind closed doors.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which caused Mike to lash out on Ruth even more. He doesn't take responsibility for his own actions. It's got to be Ruth's fault that Janet's upset.
We know several people like that.
Yeah. It ended when Mike wanted Janet to stay in bed with him all day instead of going to work one day.
Oh, gosh.
And Janet says no, and Mike becomes physical and tried choking her.
Wow.
Then he started accusing her of sleeping around and accused Janet of using them, even though they were living at her house.
Okay.
So Janet tried to get Ruth to leave Mike. She tried really hard, but Ruth just was afraid. So she kicks them out. But she still feels really bad for Ruth, so she helps them move. The day they move, she goes with them to the apartment and helps them clean, helps them unpack things, and then she stayed for dinner on moving day with her kids. The whole family's involved. She did really care about Ruth. Well, when dinner was almost over, dinner's pretty much over, Janet gets up to leave, and Mike just starts running right after her, just gets up and takes a beeline for her.
Oh, Lord.
And shoves her into her room and starts just beating the shit out of her.
Holy.
And then Mike stops, kind of like he realized what he was doing, and goes to the bathroom to get her a towel. Then once he goes back into the room, he just gets pissed all over again and starts beating her more in front of her kids and his kids.
Okay.
And then he started strangling her, and she says to one of her kids, "Call the cops,"
Right.
And then Mike snaps out of it and stops. He realized, what's happening, and he just starts pushing and kicking Janet and her kids out of his house.
Okay.
Janet runs to a friend's house and calls the cops, but I couldn't find anything, no charges, nothing about it.
Okay.
So I'm just assuming that he got away with that.
Yeah. Starting to sound like it.
Yeah, and this was in the 80s, but still.
Yeah.
A few months later, the Ryans moved to Whiting, Kansas. The family was still struggling financially, so they found this abandoned farmhouse.
Okay.
And the owner agreed for them to move in and live there for free as long as they maintained the house and the property. This house didn't have running water inside.
Oh.
You literally had to go to fetch a pail of water from the well to take a bath or do the dishes.
Well.
Mike didn't care about that because he was leaving his family in an abandoned home because he lived on the road.
Right.
Yeah. So it really he didn't care about his wife and kids having comfort because he wasn't there most of the time.
For those of you who are unaware of this, I am a truck driver, but I do not act like this at all. Okay? I just want to clarify.
So one upside to moving here is they are closer to Mike's sister Patty and her husband Steve. And the couples were really close and spent a lot of time together, had dinner dates and stuff together. So Steve introduces Mike to the Posse Comitatus,
Okay.
which I can do a whole episode on the Posse Comitatus. It was part of the Christian identity movement.
Mm.
So the gist of this movement is pretty much Nazism hidden behind Christianity.
Yeah.
They believe that Eve did not eat the apple from the snake, but instead had sex with the snake, which was Satan. The snake impregnates her with Cain, and then she has sex with Adam, and Adam impregnates her with Abel.
Okay.
Therefore, Cain is literally a demon snake human hybrid.
Yeah.
Any of his descendants possess the demon seed, and anyone who is not Celtic and Germanic, such as Anglo-Saxon, Nordic, or Aryan, are descendants of Cain and literally evil.
Having worked in prison, I know about this because
Yeah.
the Aryan Brotherhood.
All us whiteys are descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and therefore the descendants of ancient Israelites.
Yeah.
So that's what they believe. So Nazism, pretty much. It's a different story, but the same agenda. Well, that's kind of what they're doing here.
Yeah.
But the posse particularly did not like the Jews. They believe the Jews are controlling all of the world's money and keeping the working class man down.
Now that's Nazism.
Now, in the 1980s, when the farming crisis was happening, this movement gained a lot of support because they also were anti-government. Because they believed the Jews were also controlling the government, and they were also anti-income tax, which I can get behind that.
I can get behind the income tax, but Jews ruling everything, I don't know about that.
Right. Mike goes to a lecture where a founding member in that cult is the speaker, James Paul Wickstrom.
Okay.
Michael was completely captivated by his teachings on religion. He was just totally sold on it. So the posse called God Yahweh, which is just Hebrew for God.
Right.
Which is kind of odd to use a Hebrew word for an anti-Semitic hate group, but okay. Way to stick it to the Jews, I guess. Taking it back.
Sure.
So Mike starts doing his own research and going to more of Wickstrom's lectures, buying his VHS tapes. Mike is just totally sold on this and was actually pissed at his parents for raising him Baptist.
Okay.
So one night he meets Wickstrom for real, and they are hanging out, and Wickstrom teaches Mike the arm test.
Okay.
Which is crazy stupid, the way they explained it. So you're being asked questions, and you put your arm straight out, level with the ground. Then the person asking the questions uses their hand to push down on your hand at the furthest point.
Right.
If your arm stays up, the answer is yes. And if your arm goes down, the answer is no.
So literally the person asking the question
can control what your arm does. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I will have to put up like a clip or a picture of it or something so you guys can understand better. These arm tests are a direct, air quotes, link to Yahweh. Mike and Wickstrom got kind of close, and Wickstrom actually considered Mike to be his leader in Kansas, like his inside man in Kansas.
Okay.
Mike started holding his own meetings out of his house. But he stepped back away from the political aspect of the posse, the anti-tax, anti-government stuff. Mike really just focused on the religion aspect of it.
Okay.
Some of the people that came to his meetings were people he met at the posse meetings, two of which were David Andreas and James Tim, both members of the Mennonite Church.
Oh.
They were best friends growing up. Mike also met Rick Stice. Rick Stice had an 80-acre pig farm in rural Nebraska that he was at risk of losing. And he also recently lost his wife and had 3 children he was trying to provide for and raise.
Right.
Then he also met Jimmy Haverkamp. Jimmy got pretty much his whole family to join this group. Among those family members of his that joined was one of Jimmy's sisters, Cheryl Gibson. She had 5 kids, and she was married to Lester. Well, Cheryl and Lester were having marital problems. When she joined the cult, their marital problems only got worse.
Oh, yeah.
Her husband, Lester, did not like Mike's teachings, but Lester wanted to work on his marriage with Cheryl. He had every intention of staying married to her, and he went to those meetings with Cheryl being the supportive husband.
Okay.
Well, one day, Lester leaves his wife and 5 kids and goes to work. just leaves to go to work. And
Right.
he comes back to an empty house.
Oh shit.
Cheryl took all the kids and packed up and left.
Wow.
The cult starts to really take shape around this time. Mike is building a following. He lost his job, so he has all this free time to dedicate to his teachings.
Okay.
So Cheryl Gibson was with the cult. Um, Also, Lester did not know where she went off to with his kids. He did hear Cheryl's family talking about Mike, and he kind of had an idea that he might have been involved and that she might be with them because she was spending time with them.
Okay.
So Mike instantly falls head over heels for Cheryl from the word go, and he is just in her ear trying to get her single.
Oh boy.
Cheryl files for divorce, and Lester gets the papers, and he was just devastated all over again. He knew they were having marital problems, but Lester was still in it for the long haul. Lester knew something was up, though. He felt something fishy going on. Cheryl also gets an order of protection, so he can't even have any contact with her.
Oh gosh. All right.
Lester planned to talk to Cheryl at divorce court, but Mike had a plan for that. He had Ruth go with her and play interference between them, so he didn't get a chance to be alone with her.
Wow.
Yes. So the judge wants to know why Cheryl wants a restraining order, and Cheryl just makes some shit up on the fly that Lester was beating her and cheating on her. Like
Wow.
right there, like, okay?
All right.
So the divorce was granted, but Cheryl didn't get everything she wanted. Lester still got visitation with his kids, and Mike did not like that.
Well.
So next thing you know, the whole cult is moving to Rick Stice's pig farm in Rulo, Nebraska, including Cheryl and her 5 kids.
What the fuck?
So they had like a small house they called the main house where all the women and children lived. Then they had like a trailer they called the South Trailer where all the men stayed. And pig pens and barns and stuff scattered all over the property.
Okay.
So Mike, Ruth, their 3 children, so that's 5.
Mm-hmm.
Cheryl Gibson and her 5 kids, that's 11.
Yeah.
Jimmy Haverkamp, another sister, Lisa Haverkamp, who was only 15. That's 13 people.
Mm-hmm.
Then Rick Stice and his 3 kids.
Okay.
That's,
So you're 17.
17. Then David Andreas and James Tim also live in there now.
19 people so
Yes. And how many fucking kids? Was that like 12 kids? Jesus Christ.
far. Yeah.
Just my own personal hell. Like, I love my kids, but Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mike also ordered all the kids be pulled out of school and be homeschooled. Like, fuck. Okay. Literally my own personal hell.
I'm kind of on a
Homeschooling
catch-22.
12 kids.
I'm kind of on a catch-22 there on that one because, yes, I want the kids to go to school just so I can have a break from them and stuff like that. Well, I get a break from them technically, but on the other side, though, I don't really trust the school system nowadays. So.
Yeah, I can agree with that. So, one of the first thing Mike does when they get there to the pig farm is make Cheryl Gibson his first cult wife, but technically his second wife since he's already fucking married.
Yeah.
Of course,
What is
this
it with
guy
cult
puts
leaders?
plural marriage into his cult.
Of course. I was about to say, what is it with cult leaders and having to have so many wives? Listen, women are hard enough to deal with. Why do you want more?
Fuck you. He also married Maxine Haverkamp, Cheryl's mom.
Wow.
Behind Maxine's husband's back. He also makes her go on a honeymoon to consummate the marriage. Then said she was going against Yahweh if she didn't do it, plus a bunch of other stuff to get her to do it, which I think should be a form of rape.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
gonna have to say so.
Yeah, he also tells her to keep all of this a secret from her actual husband, which she does.
Why?
In addition to his multiple marriages, Mike arranges a marriage between 15-year-old Lisa Haverkamp and Rick Stice, who I couldn't find how old he was at the time, but he looked to be a man in his late 20s to early 30s. He also had 3 kids, and he owned the farm, so he had to have been somewhat of an adult.
Yeah.
Anyway, he had one stipulation to this marriage. They could not consummate the marriage until Yahweh said it was okay to.
Or until he says it's okay.
Yes. One of Yahweh's big rules was jealousy. You aren't allowed to get jealous about anything, which, I mean, jealousy isn't a good thing, so I could see being sold on that.
Okay.
But fucking dickhead Mike over here is only making this a rule so his wife can feel like shit for being upset with him, all these for marrying all these other women and sleeping with them.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mike would tell Ruth things like, Yahweh knows you're jealous and you need to be punished. You have to fast for 2 days. Yeah.
Okay.
So one day Ruth has had enough and she finally leaves and goes to her sister's house. But of course, Mike wouldn't leave her alone. He doesn't really seem to want her, but God forbid she doesn't want him.
Hmm.
He made her all these promises that things would be better if she came back, and Ruth fell for it. Or maybe it was just because he had the kids. Who knows?
Yeah.
But of course, it was a lie. As soon as she came back, he beat the crap out of her and promised her if she ever left again, he would kill her. And she believed him.
I can believe that.
So Mike is starting to really develop a God complex. Now that he has all these followers and people believing him, his sermons are starting to get more and more crazy. So he tells his followers one day in a sermon that there are 144,000 people that are the chosen people, and that Yahweh told him he and his followers are among them.
Yeah, of course.
He also told them the final battle of good versus evil was coming soon, and once it was over, that Yahweh would drop a new Jerusalem on top of the United States.
I feel like several cults have said that.
Yes. He was possessed by the Archangel Michael,
That's a new one.
and he could speak directly to Yahweh.
Well, I bet he could.
Yes. Also, in the book of Revelations, Michael leads the army against evil.
Yes.
Yes. So he was going to be the leader of this army against evil. Around the same time, he tells his followers to start stealing farming equipment and cows from local farms.
Well, why?
Well, they use the profits from this to basically prepare for Armageddon. Lots of non-perishable foods, survival gear, weapons, ammunitions, a lot of weapons and ammo. They also were stockpiling charcoal to use to make bombs.
Oh, that's okay.
Mm-hmm. But they aren't committing a crime. They're soldiers in the army of God. They're doing this for the greater good, obviously.
Scratch the whole theft part of it. Stockpiling in non-perishables, weaponry, and prepping for Armageddon itself is not illegal.
Not a terrible idea, no, nor illegal. God's army needs this money more than the farmers do, of course, because the farmers aren't following Yahweh, so they have to be evil.
Oh, I'm not.
This is what he's
gonna get on my rant. About that.
Mike is telling his followers to kind of console them on their feelings about stealing from. So they literally stole tractors,
wow,
boats, lawnmowers, tools, crop sprayers, cattle. They were just sneaking on these farms at night and taking these huge things, driving them on over to Stice's farm.
I'm imagining like stealing a crop sprayer. Like those things are massive.
Yes. They kept some of it too, of course, as one does.
Yeah, okay.
It's crazy they got away with it for as long as they did, honestly. Mike had an answer for that, though. They weren't getting caught because they were doing the right thing. That's why his followers did not question things.
Of course.
Yes, he was very good at being the master manipulator, as one does when they are a cult leader.
Yeah.
So now Dennis Ryan, Mike's oldest son, is about 13 or 14 when all this is happening. A young, impressionable boy who idolizes their dad, like most young boys. Right. So he is fully indoctrinated into this cult. His dad, Mike, basically drills it into his head. To disobey him is to disobey Yahweh.
Not even going to get into that.
Like at some point, Mike gives Dennis an AR-15 and says that during the Battle of Armageddon that he would probably have to kill all of his friends, and he had to buck up and be a man about it, son, because there's no crying in Armageddon. Dennis believed all this to be true, so it hardened him at a very young age.
Right.
Then Mike gathers all of his followers for another revelation.
Oh God.
Yahweh has named Mike King of Israel.
Of course.
And Dennis the Prince. Yahweh has also named Lisa, the teenage girl, Queen of Israel.
So.
Yeah. He also said Rick Stice was the high priest, and all the other men were privates who could work their way up to become generals.
All right.
Well, Rick didn't like this. He felt as though Mike was trying to focus his attention on his new girl, his 15-year-old wife.
Right.
Rick was getting jealous over this because he just knew something was up. Mike was always bragging about his skills in the bedroom, especially at how good he was at pleasing a woman.
I feel like that's just a guy's talk.
Yeah, well, in front of the women, and in front of Lisa. As we know, Yahweh doesn't like jealousy, so Rick tried to keep his mouth shut and play it cool. So everyone is starting to notice a shift in Mike's personality. He's smoking weed constantly again and being more aggressive and more short-tempered. And he's getting really fucking full of himself, too.
Yeah, sounds like it.
And everyone is starting to get a little scared of him and what he is capable of. He started to making really strict rules. Lisa was the only only woman on the farm allowed to use the telephone.
That's
Um,
different.
The women had to dress a certain way, wearing dresses Mike or Yahweh picked out. He also kept the men and women away from each other. They weren't allowed to talk to each other at all. Only at dinner time when the women passed the men the plate, they could have "Hi, how are you?"
What the hell?
Yes. Also, he starts really hating Rick's 5-year-old son, Luke, his youngest. Luke was having a hard time dealing with the death of his mom still, and he was really attached at the hip to his dad, Rick. And Luke would cry for his daddy all the time, and it drove Mike nuts. And he started telling everyone that Luke had Satan in him and that he was a mongrel.
Yeah.
And Mike started mistreating him, talking down to him, verbally and physically abusing him anytime he got in the way. And Rick was afraid of him, though, so he just tried to encourage his son to stay away from Mike.
Yeah.
Which I can't wrap my head around, being afraid of anyone enough to let them hurt my child, but okay. I guess so. So Rick also started to notice that Mike was not really a big fan of Rick anymore, and that he was just really short with him and didn't seem to want to be bothered with him. Well, this all blew up when it's found out that Lisa is pregnant.
Oh, shit.
Yahweh hadn't given them permission to consummate the marriage yet. And Lisa tells Mike that Rick raped her. But either way, it's statutory because she's 15.
Yeah.
So Mike beats the shit out of Rick and ends his marriage to Lisa. Takes Lisa as his 4th wife. I think we're on 4. Then he declares that Lisa's pregnancy is immaculate conception and that it's Yahweh's grandchild.
Ooh.
Now, Lester Gibson, remember him? Cheryl's husband?
Yeah.
He's not given up on his kids without a fight. He's gotten the cops and the press involved. He's got his lawyer, and he's going to find his kids. He's putting up posters. People around town know what Cheryl and their kids look like.
Right.
Because he's not given up. And Mike gets wind of this and declares that Cheryl and her kids cannot go outside at all. So then Mike tells Jimmy Haverkamp that Yahweh has told him to have Jimmy break into his parents' house. Remember, his parents are members of the cult too. Mike's married to his mom. Mm-hmm. But Jimmy has to break into their house and steal some money because it's what Yahweh is telling him to do. And Jimmy is really confused and reluctant.
Okay.
But Mike doubles down on this being Yahweh's plan, so he did it.
Doesn't that make a conflict in his own statement?
Yeah. So by early 1985, Mike could see everyone was starting to doubt him, and he was contradicting things that he had said earlier.
Yeah.
They started to see that things were just not all the way right. So Mike's like, you know what? I'll show you what happens to a non-believer. Remember, James Tim only talked about him once before this. Okay. Well, Mike focuses his attention on regularly beating James Tim. He converted the South trailer into his prison, and anyone who disobeyed Yahweh could be held there. James Tim was locked up there, receiving beatings and humiliation daily. One of the things he did to humiliate him was force him to have sex with a goat.
What? Oh.
Yeah, which is fucking crazy. But James didn't want to fall out of favor with Yahweh, so he just takes it all in the hopes that Yahweh will forgive him. And Mike demotes James to a slave. So by March of 1985, James, Rick Stice, and Luke, the 5-year-old, were all demoted to slave status. Saw that coming.
Yeah.
So they are all receiving regular beatings and being treated like less than human. So Rick is just in fight or flight mode, and he runs away and escapes. But after being away for a week, he comes back for his kids.
Okay.
Well, as soon as he gets there, the men all beat the shit out of him. he literally left his kids and his farm behind. I don't know. I mean, I don't understand the fight or flight mode there, but okay. Mike then doubled down on the humiliation for them after Rick came back.
Mm-hmm.
First, Mike forced Rick to have sex with a goat like he did with James. Then he forced James to have anal penetrative sex with Rick. He also tells him to make it rough, make it really hurt. He also forced Rick Stice and Luke Stice, father and son, a 5-year-old boy, to perform oral sex on one another while all the men watched.
This is so wrong.
Mm-hmm. Also, while being slaves, they were forced to do all the housework and stand guard sometimes for days at a time without sleep. They were also chained to the front porch of the house at night.
Oh, what the fuck?
Yes. So now all of the men have been demoted to slaves, pretty much all of the men. So that meant that Dennis, even though only 15, could move up in the ranks.
Right.
Mike told Dennis that Mike would die in the Battle of Armageddon, and Dennis would have to take over as king of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
He gave Dennis more power within the group. This was all going to this young 15-year-old's head. He was raised to believe this, so it's kind of all he knows.
Right.
So one day, Dennis is hanging out at the South Trailer doing some bird hunting. He was inside with his gun resting on the window pane aimed outside. So James Tim is in there with him because this is like the jail, the South Trailer.
Yeah.
So he goes to shoot a bird and he misses.
Okay.
So he starts to blame James for him missing because he's out of favor with Yahweh. It's his fault he missed the shot.
Oh,
well,
Lord.
Dennis and James are discussing this. Dennis's gun goes off and he shoots James in the face and went through his cheek, actually. Yes. So Dennis says he freaked out and called for help, just saying, I didn't mean to do it. It was an accident. I didn't mean it. So Mike says to get David Andreas, James's best friend, because he had some medic training from the National Guard. David tried to help, but he really didn't know what to do.
Right.
And so they decided to pack the wound with cayenne pepper and bandage it up.
In a way, it makes sense, but
it sounds painful.
Oh, it's definitely painful, but it...
So then Mike tells Dennis and James that it's all James's fault that this has happened, that Yahweh made it happen because Yahweh was angry at James. Even though James had been shot, Mike kept beating him, and he was still being forced to sleep outside. And
dude's gonna die from septic or something.
Yeah. Rick Stice talked to James and asked why he didn't just leave, and James said he wanted to get back right with Yahweh. So he was still staying strong in his faith on this.
Gee.
So one day, Mike goes after James Tim, and accuses him of being jealous of Mike, being the chosen one. He's super pissed, screaming in his face. They're inside talking. Mike goes to leave, and Luke was just in his pathway, the 5-year-old boy.
Right.
And Mike just pushes him super hard. And Luke hits his head on a bookshelf, and he's not responding.
Oh, shit.
Now his dad, Rick, was there and saw everything, and he comes running over, freaking out. His little 5-year-old Luke is still breathing, but he's unconscious. Mike was saying he didn't mean to do this the whole time, but no one gets the child medical attention.
Why?
Mike says, well, let me run to the main house and ask Yahweh what to do. And Mike comes back and says, Yahweh says to just let him sleep it off. So they put little Luke in bed, and to make sure that Rick can't get his baby help, he's chained extra tight to the porch that night.
PSA, don't do that. Get medical attention.
Luke Stice sadly died in the middle of the night, 5 years old.
Man, why?
So Rick decides he's got to get the fuck out of there or he's going to be next.
Mm-hmm.
And another twisted, fucked up punishment, Mike forces Rick and James to dig Luke's grave.
What? Oh, come on. All right.
And while they're doing it, Mike talks trash about his son, Luke, and what garbage he was.
It's his grave I'd be fucking digging, I'm just saying.
So Rick gets social security checks for his kids because their mother being gone, and Rick had to cash those checks for Mike. Those checks, he was giving them to Mike. Okay. So Rick uses that opportunity to run away.
Of course he does.
And leaves his other 2 fucking kids behind. I think that. So anyway, so Lisa is coming close to having her baby, and to celebrate that, Mike decides to go out and kill a wild turkey and have a feast and a party. He kills an 18-pound turkey. It's a big fucking deal. So the turkey was being stored in the fridge in the south trailer and then brought over to the main house to be cooked when the time came.
Okay.
Well, when the turkey was done, something was off about it. It smelled of ammonia and it just didn't look right.
Yeah.
Usually when a meat smells like ammonia, you think it went bad
It went
before
bad,
you,
or it
you
had.
got to cook it.
Yeah.
Yeah, or just there was something wrong with that bird, whatever. But because the turkey was stored in the south trailer and James was the only one staying there right now,
Did he
Mike
piss on it?
tells Mike tells Tim Haverkamp to come with him, and he's going down to the south trailer looking for a chemical cleaner that James could have used to poison the turkey. Then he asks Yahweh if James has been poisoning the turkey, and Yahweh says yes, of course. And to bring it even in deeper, he says that James Tim has been pouring a cap full of this cleaner every day on the turkey every day.
Face palm, face palm, face palm.
Yes.
Mm.
They do find a cleaner, obviously, like in it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Mike decides that James is one of Satan's people. Well, he already kind of did. Mike is not going to let any of Satan's people on the farm when Yahweh's grandchild is coming into the world. So he is going to torture and humiliate James Tim until he leaves. So on April 29th, 1985, James was brought into one of the hog sheds and the torture begins.
Oh no.
He has David force him to have sex with a goat, again with the bestiality.
What?
He also has David leave him to sleep in the shed, but David feels bad about all this. It is his childhood best friend, so he brings him a mattress to sleep on and he brings him some food.
Well, at least he did that.
So the next morning, Mike makes Dennis, Jimmy, and Tim go down to the hog shed with him. So he decides to further sexually humiliate him by sodomizing him with a shovel handle.
Oh God!
And making all the guys take a turn, including his 15-year-old son, Dennis.
What the?
Mike said, ought to shove this thing up to your heart while he was doing it, and the coroner confirmed that the shovel handle had been inserted at least 2 feet up into James Tim's body.
Oh my God.
They also decided at some point that the shovel handle was not big enough, so they ended up deciding on a pick handle.
Oh.
And they did rupture his rectal wall with that.
Most definitely.
Yes. Also, they each whipped him with a leather whip 15 times apiece.
Good grief.
Then the next day, Mike has them put him in a somewhat crucifix position so they can take turns whipping him on the chest.
Ugh.
And then they shoot off the tips of his fingers on his left hand, each of them taking a turn shooting off a finger. Then they adjourned for lunch, and Mike said Yahweh wants James Tim dead by the afternoon.
Ugh.
Mike takes a regular razor blade and skinned parts of his legs.
Oh man,
And
this
James
is just getting worse.
Still alive during all of this, and still like begging Yahweh for forgiveness.
Sorry,
the entire
guys.
Time.
Sorry, this is getting much worse.
So David is not holding it together at all. By this point, this is his childhood best friend. So Mike tells him to go to the south field where Luke was buried with a tractor and disc the field. So David knew what was coming after that. And he instructs Jimmy to go watch the road. Now with Dennis and Tim Haverkamp still present, Mike stomped on James Tim's chest over and over again until he died.
Yeah, crushing the sternum will do that.
James Tim, throughout all of his torture, never stopped with his belief in Yahweh and begged for Yahweh to forgive him the entire time.
Yeah, I feel like you're praying to the wrong God.
And Dennis, in his testimony and interviews, really stressed how much that stuck with him. Mike had them bury James Tim about 30 feet away from where Luke Stice was buried. Mike also had Tim Haverkamp shoot him in the head to make it look like he was assassinated. But, I mean, obviously, they ruptured his fucking bowels. Like, do you think the coroner's not going to find that? Like...
well, stupid is as stupid does.
So Lisa had her baby, a little boy, the day after James Tim died. So on the night of June 25th, 1985, David Andreas and Jimmy Haverkamp were going to steal some farming equipment like they had been doing this entire time.
Mm-hmm.
But they were in Seneca, Kansas at a Kohler factory. And they were going to steal a crop sprayer. So they go there in the dead of the night, they hook this crop sprayer up to their truck, and drive it down this dark, deserted road back to Rulo. And they
Okay.
just so happen to pass a police officer. And the officer noticed they don't have any taillights on the crop sprayer. So
Mhm.
the officer makes a U-turn to come back for them.
Right.
So David and Jimmy are obviously completely panicking right away. They aren't supposed to get caught. Yahweh is supposed to protect them.
Right.
So Richardson County Sheriff Corey McNabb pulls them over for not having any taillights on the crop sprayer. And once he starts talking to them, he notices they are really nervous and he thinks they are hiding something. So he asks them to step out of the vehicle with their hands up. So they step out but keep their hands in their pockets. And he gives them a second warning, hands in the air. They
Right.
still don't listen. So Officer McNabb is getting really nervous. They are hiding weapons. So he pulls his gun out and starts yelling, "Get your fucking hands in the air before I shoot you."
Yeah.
So they finally listen. And so he cuffs them and calls for backup. And he's searching the men and the vehicle. He finds that both men had loaded guns on them with the hammer up, ready to fire.
Holy shit.
Yes. Then in the truck, he finds two HK-99 pistols, both loaded, and two 12-inch long hunting knives. So he starts questioning, what are you doing with all these weapons?
Yeah.
Very quickly, they confess to stealing the crop sprayer.
Okay.
So law enforcement ends up connecting them to a lot of these other robberies with tire tread and shoe tread marks.
Gotcha.
Fast.
Yeah.
So they get a warrant for the farm in Rulo. They find all of this stolen farming equipment and just stockpiles and stockpiles of weapons and ammunition. They found 50 to 60 different types of guns, and 14 of which were fully automatic.
Yeah, that's a big no-no.
Yeah. During the search, Mike is kind of acting clueless to all of this.
Of course
Like,
he is.
this isn't my farm. I'm just a friend of the family staying here. He actually showed the police where all of the stolen property was being kept and put all the blame on David and Jimmy. Of course.
Of course.
Well, while they are there, one of the officers recognizes Cheryl Gibson and all of her kids. Remember, Lester
Right.
had
Right.
contacted the police and the news. He was being very vocal about wanting to find his kids, putting up posters.
Right.
Also, there was a warrant out for Cheryl's arrest because she went against the court order in her and Lester's divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a CPS pickup order for the kids
Oh shit.
by this point. So Cheryl is immediately arrested. The kids are taken to foster care. Lester is informed they found his kids. He's finally reunited with his kids after over a year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just sounds like my absolute worst fear.
Yeah.
Being separated from my kids.
Oh yeah.
At the same time, my worst fear is being homeschooling 12 kids. The police also track down Rick Stice. And they get Rick to come in and talk to them about what the hell is going on at that farm.
Yeah.
Rick is scared of Mike still, though, so he lies at first. Then, probably after several interrogations with the police, Rick spills the beans about everything. The robberies, the torture, his son dying, everything.
I bet that was a load off of his shoulders.
Yeah. So the FBI gets involved now, and they get a warrant out for Mike's arrest. They think they have a good case for interstate transportation of stolen property. So
Right.
that's what the warrant was for originally. So the authorities decided it could possibly be really hard to arrest Mike.
Yeah.
So they devised a plan to lure him down to the police station. So Sheriff Corey McNabb goes to the farm and tells Mike that the police need to speak with him and it would be better if he came down to the station so as not to upset everybody at the farm.
Right.
So Mike agrees and willingly gets into the police car. And once he arrives to the police station, they arrest him. And now with Mike behind bars, the police feel more comfortable searching the farm again safely.
Right.
So shortly before going to search the farm a second time, David, Andreas, and Jimmy Haverkamp
Okay.
have had a lot of time to talk about things and reflect while they're sitting in jail for stealing all this farming equipment.
Right.
And they are pretty much convinced now that Mike is a fraud. So they confess to the police about everything and corroborate Rick Stice's story and tell the police about the death of James Tim.
Oh no.
So police go to search the farm again, accompanied by David and Jimmy. With their help, it does not take long for them to find Luke Stice and James Tim's bodies.
I bet not.
Tim Haverkamp, Mike Ryan, and 15-year-old Dennis Ryan were all served with murder warrants.
Okay.
Poor Ruth, she was in Kansas living with her kids and one of the Haverkamp sisters. Police had to rip her 15-year-old son out of her arms while she begged and pleaded with them, saying that it wasn't his fault, that it was Mike's fault. Mike had promised Ruth he would protect Dennis and not tell them about Dennis's involvement. He did not. He tried to throw him under the bus along with everyone else.
Of course he did.
Anything to not take responsibility for what he did.
Right.
Mike Ryan was found guilty of first-degree murder of James Tim, and he pled no contest to the second-degree murder charge of Luke Stice.
Jeez.
Mike was sentenced to death by electric chair, but Mike died in 2015 of brain cancer before this death sentence could be carried out.
Good.
Mike stayed strong on his beliefs until the bitter end, saying he did it all for Yahweh and he was the chosen one.
Chosen asshole.
Piece of shit garbage human being. Dennis Ryan was tried as an adult for the murder of James Tim and was found guilty of the murder in the second degree. He was sentenced to life in prison. Mike told Dennis not to worry, that the angels would come and break him out of the prison and rescue him.
Oh, they came and got him all right.
Dennis believed his dad that he would be saved for a long time until the angels never came. It took Dennis a long time to see his dad for what he really was, but he eventually did and denounced Yahweh and all of his father's teachings.
Good.
Dennis also slowly over time built a relationship back up with his mother again. He did watch a lot of interviews with him. He does seem like very genuine in his remorse for everything and like talking about being brainwashed and raising awareness on it. And he talks about like his struggles with his relationship with his mom and how he blamed her for so long for staying with him. But I mean, at the same time, she's a victim in this too.
Right.
Yeah. Then one day, Dennis's conviction was overturned. One of many that the state of Nebraska overturned due to lack of evidence presented to the jury.
Oh.
So he was able to go back to court. And Dennis was given the option to plead guilty to manslaughter, which meant he would be released for time served, since he had already served 11 years.
Okay.
So on April 15th, 1997, Dennis Ryan was released at the age of 27, which I think is the only good part about this story, that Dennis turned himself around and got a new shot at life.
No doubt.
David Andreas and Jimmy Haverkamp were both convicted of second-degree murder of James Tim. Also, possession of stolen property and carrying concealed weapons.
Right.
They were both given 26 years in prison. Both got out only serving half of that time because they were both model prisoners. And they were actually both released on the same day, November 22nd, 1998.
Oh, okay.
Tim Haverkamp pled guilty to second-degree murder of James Tim, and he was sentenced to 10 years to life in prison. He was released on parole in 2009 after serving 23 years, and he got off parole in 2014.
Wow.
Yes. Rick Stice received a 6-month jail sentence with 18 months of house arrest and an additional 5 years probation for the stolen cattle. He also lost custody of his kids, who were put into foster care.
I mean, makes sense.
Yeah. He kind of made some poor parenting decisions, to say it in the least.
Parenting? Hell, he made poor decisions all along.
Lisa Haverkamp got her life back on track, finished high school, and got married and had more kids.
Oh, well, there's that.
Yeah. Cheryl Gibson actually went through like a deprogramming treatment for cult survivors.
Okay.
And her and Lester actually got back together and stayed together until 1999.
Wow, that's impressive.
James Tim was only in his early 20s when his life met a tragic and horrific end.
Oh.
He was described as being a very kind and caring person, and he loved his family and loved being involved in the church. And if he had never met Mike Ryan, he probably still would be alive today.
Yeah.
Luke Stice, that poor baby boy, he just missed his mom and needed more support from his dad.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, he was a monster's punching bag. It's just so tragic, a child lost.
Yeah.
Just innocent and disgusting. I also feel like everyone involved in this cult, other than Mike, was a victim of Mike in their own way. It's just horrifying and tragic. So that was my story. What did you think?
That's a lot. That's a lot
Makes
to take in.
Makes you kind of want to go punch a wall.
More than just a wall, but the guy's already dead. I don't know. I don't care what kind of beliefs I've ever had or followed through or anything like that. I wouldn't. First and foremost, never, ever would I let my family be in jeopardy of harm of any kind like that. No.
I don't know where in the Bible it tells you that people who follow Satan should fuck goats. Because I want to know what chapter that's in.
No, I don't know.
um, yeah, I mean, I in my research in many years of cults, have found sympathy for cult members, not leaders. I will never have sympathy for that and the things that they do to people. Um, but they are literally brainwashed. That's why I did try to stress that a lot when talking about Dennis, because
Mhm.
he is a murderer. Like, he participated in the murder of James Tim.
Oh yeah.
But I don't think that everyone in this world is inherently good or evil. I think everyone is a little bit of both, except for Mike Ryan. I think he's pretty much pure evil. Um,
Well, I mean, if hell, since this is technically Christian based, if you want to go by that, no one is born evil. No one. It literally, that's a whole thing in Christianity, is no
right.
one is born evil. You are taught evil.
And I think that, like, people who find themselves victims of cults are usually in a crossroads in their lives when they're struggling with something and struggling with their own identity or what have you, and they're looking for something to believe in,
Hmm.
and they become victimized by these manipulators.
I gotta say, in a lot of cases, it definitely comes down to that you're at your lowest point, you're struggling, needing, you literally are at your lowest point, and that's when the
People can really take advantage.
yep,
Yeah.
that's when the worst of the worst comes out.
But I mean, this story is really fucked up, and it really, like, fucked with my head reading a lot of this. But I think the good thing that comes out of telling these stories is maybe somebody that is in a shitty situation, not even necessarily a cult, but just in a bad relationship, could hear this and it could wake them up to what, like, them being in a situation that they don't deserve.
Right, yeah.
And I'm sorry that if this was too heavy of a story, I just had never heard of this cult. It is a small one and not really talked about a lot,
Right.
but it is way too fucked up to not be well known.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of similarities to Waco in that,
Yes.
and a lot of other Christian cults.
Yeah. And for our listeners, if you want to just, I wouldn't suggest like throw the story out there, but maybe our little PSA portions in here. Um, I have to say, like, I've been at some very, very low points in my life, and I just got to say to everybody, it does get better. You will become a stronger, much stronger person by just simply having the will to move forward.
Yeah, I feel like you and I are kind of in a low, like a perpetual fucking low.
We are
Like, we have
definitely,
these waxing and waning lows and highs that are just crazy.
yeah.
But every time our relationship comes out better
Mm,
because of the bad things that are happening. I feel like.
yeah, I mean, we grow every day. Like every situation, and this is everybody, not just us, but every situation that you find yourself in, it comes down to that old idiom, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, because that's the truth. If you can think about the hardest thing that you've went through in your life and just remember, you're still here. You made it through
I guess I'm just trying to explain myself to our 10 listeners about why
it.
I would be so interested to tell you such a fucked up story. I mean, I'm interested in fucked up things. It fascinates me, the whole psychology behind it. Mike Ryan was also a victim. I kind of clued into that early in the story of, like, domestic abuse in his childhood. So, like, victims often become abusers, and, like, just all of that is very fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to do this story. This was also a more known story, so it's not something that's been regurgitated a million times.
Yeah, that's for sure. I haven't heard about it.
Yeah,
So.
I'd never heard about it before I researched it.
Yeah, and I'm not the one that goes and searches true crime, but I've heard a lot of the more notable ones. So,
So that's my story.
whew, it was definitely a rough one. All right, well, let's hope that mine doesn't have any kind of darkness as far as that goes. Jesus, criminy.
Are you saying you didn't like my story?
Like is a strong word because like that's how do you say that you liked that horrible stuff that happened?
No, I did not like it. I didn't like it. It's just, I don't know. I guess the more sadistic a story is, the more intrigued I am as to how the fuck they got there.
Yeah, I mean, you were definitely like on the edge of your seat trying to read it to me for sure. So, but are you ready for a random fact of the day? So, did you know that on August 7th, 2018, China banned the live-action Christopher Robin Winnie the Pooh movie in China? Like, couldn't do it because it mocked the Chinese president Xi Jinping.
Didn't know that.
I didn't either. I was like, really? That's why? And I have to go, I've watched that movie and I don't know where it would have mocked the president, but it
Okay.
was it was England versus one of the world wars, so I
Yeah, that
guess
World, I think World War II was somewhat involved.
yeah,
Yes,
one or
maybe.
two. I
Okay.
don't know.
I know that they banned the interview in what is it, North Korea, where Kim Jong Un is, or is he South Korea?
He's north
Okay, so they banned the movie The Interview in North Korea. Have you
because
seen?
he's
Because
portrayed very
yeah,
stupidly in that
yes,
movie.
but it's great.
Yeah, yeah. So, do you want to tell everybody what conspiracy theory you quote on a regular basis?
Birds are not real.
Yeah. So,
I don't know. I don't. I think that I just think that it's the theory is hilarious.
well,
Um,
we're gonna get into this a little bit.
okay, do tell.
Yeah. The CIA was established in 1947. It began with one sole purpose: to monitor the American people for the possible connections to organized crime syndicates or terrorist groups that threatened our freedom.
Hmm.
Is it really that hard to believe that the CIA would find more and more creative methods to monitor us over time?
I mean, do you watch NCIS?
Yeah. Well, after the end of World War II, the fear of communism affecting the United States people in our own home turf caused a need for the bigger and better surveillance program.
Right.
Well, because of this, in 1953, Alan Dulles was made the first civilian director of the Central Intelligence Agency, or
Okay.
CIA. He made it his mission to up the ante in the surveillance game.
All right.
All right. He began having agents create smaller and smaller audio devices and video recording devices, and finding unique and interesting ways to hide them in the most random locations on agents and other devices or anything across the board.
So all our mini like home cameras now.
Yeah, I mean,
Gotcha.
actually, a lot of our cameras and stuff like that, the smaller gadgets that we have, are from surveillance technology over the years.
It just makes sense because something that the government would spill money into would eventually be capitalized
Oh,
upon.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, on the 15th of April, 1956, in a security meeting with President Eisenhower, proposing for the first time ever surveillance from the sky. This would allow for tracking while in motion, make it easier than switching from stationary camera to stationary camera. I think CCTV.
Right.
Okay. And there
Well,
were,
that's Big Brother anyway. So.
yeah. And there would be the opportunity to have multiple cameras on one target, and that are all in motion. Mm-hmm. So less a possibility of losing your target. This proposal was approved by Eisenhower, but he insisted we need prototypes and a presentation to see how everything works and make sure it works perfectly before we put it into practice, because there's a lot of innocent at risk.
Right.
Well, on a random weekend in May of 1956, the idea came to Dulles in a very strange way. While cleaning the bird shit from his car and cursing the birds for every freaking thing that they do, he had a light bulb moment. How about we replace the birds with a model airplane-like device that looked like a bird, except for we could input cameras and audio that could be sent back to remote locations for a review. He raced off to a non-disclosed location to discuss with...
You mean Area 51?
Well, I don't know. It just says non-disclosed. He rushes off to this, non-disclosed location to discuss with members of the project. And here's what the file reports.
Okay.
You ready? It's all fake.
Okay.
This whole thing is made up completely.
Okay, I'm listening.
Birds aren't real is a made-up conspiracy theory that, according to journalist Rachel Roberts, is a joke that thousands of people are in on. Here's how this works, okay? And it's not just like, oh, the government's saying it's fake. No, it's really a thing. In January of 2017, during a women's march in Memphis, Tennessee, Peter McIndoe saw a pro-Trump counter-protest that had just no reason to be there. There was no reason that a pro-Trump thing needed to be during a women's rights activist movement.
Right.
Okay.
They like to stick their heads into everything, so makes sense.
Okay. Like I said, this is political, and I hate political conversation. Well, seeing...
Let's get down to the nitty-gritty of it. Are you or are you not a Trump supporter?
I can't say I'm a supporter because I don't support everything he does. Not everything.
Okay.
But he has good plans, and that had good plans.
He had good ideas. That you liked some of his ideas when he was
and there
campaigning.
are some that work for Biden too.
Okay.
All right.
But why do you always get hurt if I talk shit about him? That's what it feels like. Don't cut it off. We can cut this out if you want. I don't feel like there's anything wrong with being real.
It's not that I'm butthurt that you talk about negatively about Trump or whatever. It's the fact that in a couple particular conversations, someone supporting Trump had nothing to do with the conversation. It was just an insistence that you throw it out there. And I want to know why it was important to throw politics into a random conversation.
Oh, it's just me bringing up politics that bugs you.
Yes, because I hate politics.
Okay, so I just had this little tick in my ear. Are you secretly hiding from me that you are a Trump supporter because you know I hate him?
No.
Okay.
I hate politics.
I just don't like you hiding things. I know you hate politics.
Yeah.
Okay, but I do like some political.
Oh, I'm fully aware.
Yes, and
because
I just send that stuff to you because it's something that touched me.
When it comes to politics,
or resonated with me.
When it comes to politics, I feel like we should fucking can the system and start the fuck over.
Agreed.
Because this left wing, right wing, fucking everybody's got a goddamn, need for this, that, and the other to be right. Fuck all that. It's not where this country needs to be.
They're all bought and paid for. That's where I'm at this point.
I like the comedy group of Jeff Foxworthy and Larry the Cable Guy and Ron White.
Yeah, I do too. We grew up on that.
they had a very valid point in one of their jokes. Maybe presidents-elect should wear suits like NASCAR drivers do so we can tell who's sponsoring them.
I agree.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the whole system is rigged at this point and we just need to hit the reset button. I agree with you there, but I don't know. I was raised that if you weren't loud about your opinions and you didn't vote, that the change that you wanted wouldn't happen.
And how I
So
feel about it now?
that's where I'm kind of stuck at this point.
Well, how I feel about it nowadays, and since I've turned eligible to vote, my opinion has not mattered. Anytime I've voted on anything, it hasn't mattered because of how our system works.
I can understand that.
Because
feeling.
think about it, like we live in upstate New York. If I vote anything Republican,
It's most likely going
it's
to get
not
outvoted
gonna.
because of New York City.
It's
Yes.
not gonna matter because New York is considerably a blue democratic belief system.
Yeah, a lot of people that live outside of New York City, this isn't very well known, but it's very like farming town country and they have very more conservative views. So a lot of people get really enraged. I mean, it is kind of mixed, but there is quite a few of conservative people in where we live, and they get very enraged by the fact that their votes don't seem to matter on policies and regarding the state because they get outvoted because of New York City and Buffalo and Syracuse and Rochester and all that. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, back in during this women's march in Memphis, Peter McIndoe decided on a whim because, the pro-Trump counter protest was just being disruptive just to be disruptive. He felt, why not be disruptive to be disruptive of everybody's bullshit?
Okay.
So on a whim, in an effort to like throw everybody off, he writes on a big old poster board that he found on the side of the road, "Birds aren't real." And he improvised the conspiracy as he marched through the streets of Memphis with both protests. Both sides. He just walked right down the center of them, screaming at the top of his lungs, "Birds aren't real." And his whole conspiracy.
Okay.
And this is where it grows. People started interacting with him and this theory immediately. They understood the purpose. The ones that were initially involved understood the whole point of what he was
I
doing.
might have seen some clips of this or something because I
Mhm.
remember. I think the whole reason that I got on the train of Birds Aren't Real was because of Vermin Supreme. I don't. You remember him?
I don't.
He's this wild dude. I think he's in Michigan or Massachusetts, but he's wearing this giant rain boot on his head and he's like he looks like a wizard straight up, and he like his policies are that when he becomes president everybody gets a free pony and like healthcare for all. Yeah, and he actually has a pretty big like following and I'm pretty sure he brought up Birds Aren't Real at some point, and I think he's hilarious.
Okay. So people started interacting with the theory of this immediately, understanding the purpose behind it was to just disrupt everything.
Right.
But more and more people started actually believing that conspiracy.
Right.
That truly this government was disposing of birds and replacing them with, devices.
Mm-hmm.
Some even saying that they've known this for quite some time, which is funny because it was just made up on the spot. By 2019, the conspiracy theory had grown to a laughable amount. Billboards were erected in Memphis saying every tweet is a lie. Get it? Like a device.
Yeah.
In 2021, there was a demonstration in front of Twitter's San Francisco headquarters demanding that they change the bird logo or admit to being part of the made-up Project Eye in the Sky.
Okay.
MSNBC, they reported on this movement and had hundreds of thousands of members in 2021.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure I'm a member of Birds
Yeah,
Aren't Real
I'm
on
guaranteeing
Facebook.
it. God, I remember, like, because we would go occasionally to, on the weekends, like, just out of matter of convenience, go to a Burger King here in town, and
Yes, and
there's
there's
seagulls
always a
everywhere.
fuck ton of seagulls in that shopping center because people feed them. And we have a really bad seagull and crow population in where we live.
And every time that we were there, Cassie would instantly shout,
Birds aren't real!
Yep.
It's just because I hate birds. Long story short.
Okay. In 2022, 60 Minutes actually had an interview with Peter. Peter presents himself as two separate personalities in this interview. It's kind of funny because he starts off the interview in that full tinfoil hat mentality. He's got this wild persona on him, being completely out there, a full-fledged conspiracy leader.
Mm-hmm.
And then just mid-stroke, he drops the persona and becomes the 24-year-old college dropout who made up the conspiracy theory with a couple friends. He drops the persona and fully reports what's going on.
Okay.
And his whole conspiracy theory and how they keep going and how he is able to live through today, solely supported by his merchandise. Just 100%.
People buy t-shirts and hats that say birds aren't real. That's fucking great.
They even
I want one now.
They even wound up buying a legit creeper van and painting all these different birds aren't real conspiracy connected things all over the van. So yeah,
I kind of want just like a plain black t-shirt and on the back it says birds aren't real. Like, I want that to happen.
Gosh. Real supporters of this conspiracy theory, like believers in it, not that it's just to disrupt, it's like they truly believe this conspiracy theory. They're called bird truthers.
Okay.
And one of their main quotes is, "If it flies, it spies."
All right, I'm in for it.
Every bird is now, this is their belief, every bird is now a robot after a complete genocide of over 12 billion birds over the span of 40 years. The matrix starts to shatter the more questions you ask. Kind of, to be fair, I mean, that's like a legit, the more we ask, the more we find out. And it kind of disrupts the plan, I guess. Peter finds that the most suspicious bird, ironically here, is the seagull. But pretty much, if it flies, it spies.
I can get down with that.
Yeah.
Fucking seagulls are assholes.
He says,
I'm telling you right now, okay? My nephew, before I had my kids years ago when I was still a teenager, my nephew was the light of my life. Cutest little boy in the world, okay? Blonde-haired, blue-eyed McFalls through and through. I mean, he does look like his dad too. But anyway. We were at the beach in Florida when we lived in Florida. My sister was on vacation with the kids. This is when she was a single mom. And we got McDonald's. We get to the beach, we're eating McDonald's, and a fucking seagull stole my nephew's French fries. And he cried. And it ruined the day. It ruined our beach day. Fuck birds.
Well, on that note, if this were a valid theory that could be proven with any form of factual background, I would have to believe this next point. And it goes off of stealing your food. Peter's conspiracy side of it says that when seagulls steal your food, they're actually taking it back to the Pentagon for DNA harvesting and testing.
Ooh.
Right.
They got my nephew's DNA.
Yep. Like I said, mid-tangent about how this all works and his whole conspiracy theory and stuff like that, he just drops the persona and begins explaining how it all came to be and why. His biggest point was to fight lunacy with lunacy. Everyone's just off the freaking rails right now, or have been, with, red versus blue, left versus right, somebody's
Yeah.
rights versus somebody's rights.
Fuck it, let's storm the Capitol. Birds aren't real. Let's go.
But he says it's all just a parody. Basically, the group that becomes Birds Aren't Real Conspiracy Theory, or Bird Truthers, is just a safe space to come and laugh at all the misinformation instead of fearing what is the truth anymore. Because truly, for a long time, that's what a lot of people have been afraid of, is what is the truth behind the government? What is the truth behind all of the theories that come out, like in K Ultra and shit like that? Well, being an outlet for a generation that has been completely surrounded by all these conspiracy theories
and tragedies,
right? We Peter just points out that the government has been lying to us for quite some time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny to just lie back to them.
Yeah. It's kind of funny that you bring that up, and I know it's going to be a couple of weeks since when this airs, but this week the government released that aliens are real, and we've been stealing their technology, and we have their dead bodies, and they've done all that shit is real. And yeah, fuck it. Like,
and nobody cares. We're like, yeah, we
I just want them to come abduct me and the kids and you. Like, I can't go with that. Y'all, we're a unit. Abduct us.
Complete sidebar here. I feel like when it comes to aliens, everybody's like, don't you believe there's something out there? Of course I believe there's something else out there in the universe. We cannot be the sole, intelligence in the universe. But
the cats are getting really active on this talk of aliens. Are y'all fucking aliens?
But my opinion of it is that, they're probably here for, visiting to just scour resources,
and they're probably scared to death of us.
No, they probably, my opinion, they probably think we're
horrible,
the worthless scum when it comes to intelligence.
That's exactly what I thought when I heard.
Yeah,
that they probably think that we're just absolutely ridiculous, and that's why they haven't actively tried to reveal themselves to the entire world.
Yeah, because we don't do anything but insist on killing each other.
Yeah,
in some form or another.
Fucking stupid shit.
Right.
But man in the sky with a magnifying glass.
Okay, so this was supposed to be a very short segment, so let me push forward here. The founders of this conspiracy theory, Peter and his friends, they say what they do watch for when going out there and pushing this campaign, so to speak, is they watch to prevent harm. They don't want to encourage harmful or hateful speak in any form.
Okay.
What they think about it as your language, the way that you present this. You have to watch being harmful or hateful, or even considering targeting people. One of the co-conspirators, I didn't catch his name. Sorry. But if you check this out on YouTube, there's a picture of the three of them sitting together in the interview. He actually has a personal experience of being targeted during a protest. And this is why he wants to prevent hate speak, so to throw it out there. Because in 2018, he was in Parkland, Florida during the mass shooting. And they called him a crisis actor for helping found the March for Our Lives.
Okay.
A lot of people were just saying that he was out there just to get his 15 minutes. Yep, get his 15 minutes of fame.
What shooting was that?
2018's Parkland, Florida mass school shooting.
Okay.
When Peter was asked about the history of his conspiracy theory, on the streets, where's all this background information coming from and stuff like that, he came up with it on the spot. He had to fulfill the story.
That's creative.
Yeah. And because of just coming off the top of his head with all these random details, he winds up asking a friend of his who's a complete history buff and has like all the time in the world essentially to come up with the best storyline for this conspiracy theory. And that's where that whole start of this came from, because it's on their website. That's the back line to this story. Starting with Peter's first video on social media, this thing has grown into chants in high schools and high school cafeterias to full-fledged website. There's merchandise, there's rallies, and there's media interviews like 60 Minutes and a few others. Actually, I've seen he's on CNN, he's on MSN, he's on a couple others.
Okay.
But he's gotten a lot of hype just literally fighting everybody's ridiculousness with the most ridiculous thing. To tell you how far he's went, though, on this background of his conspiracy theory, he hired an elderly man to fake being a whistleblower in an interview on YouTube.
That's great.
Yeah, this gentleman who was random, like they asked him on 60 Minutes, what was the details you were looking for to come up with this person? And he's like, I don't know. I just went and looked for somebody who's old and looks like they worked for the government at some point. And in this interview, the random gentleman they pulled off the street is now an ex-CIA agent, Eugene Price.
Okay.
And like I said, they have that creeper van. It includes new segments on there of birds sitting on a power line, and like with the big circle with the line through it to mean no birds on power lines, because that's how birds charge now. Yeah. The biggest supporters of this idea, here you go, are between the ages of 15 and 40. Yep. Fun fact, though, between G.W. Bush, President Bush, and Obama's terms of presidency, the law that regulates the flow of information to the news was completely abolished. So, pre this time frame, I can't remember exactly what year it happened, but before the abolishment of this, the government could not control what was stated on news channels. Okay, like what was being presented to the public. So it made for a more non-biased presentation. However, with this being abolished, it's kind of scary, because if you watch the news outlet provided by Sinclair Broadcasting, they own several, like actually a lot of news stations, all fall underneath Sinclair Broadcasting.
Okay.
Have you ever heard this on a news channel? False news has become all too common.
Yeah.
And it becomes a danger to our democracy.
Yes.
All of them say the exact same thing. Like, there's even a YouTube video out there somewhere of where they put every single news channel saying the exact same thing, the exact same way, same inflection and everything across the board. It is creepy. But it just shows that whoever's agenda is up top is now the one that's being presented. That's why during Trump versus Biden's campaign, people who are more democratic in belief refuse to watch Fox News because they supported Trump's beliefs.
Yeah.
As were Republican refusing to do CNN because they pushed the
Well, yeah,
Democratic.
that's always been the case even before.
Right. but it's become more so, more prevalent
Yeah, well,
because of
Fox
this.
News, well, both, all of them have become more and more radical and crazy. And
Oh yeah,
I think I see that our generation isn't really watching the news at all.
right. Oh yeah, because
I certainly don't.
there's no reason to anymore. But one
It's
thing,
just too much.
yeah. But one thing that keeps being brought up when talking about this, especially the Sinclair broadcasting situation, is that everybody fights and argues over it. You're messing with our democracy. Well, our government system is not a democracy.
No, not anymore.
No, it never was.
Yeah.
It's called a democratic republic. Okay, which stems from democratic means that the people choose the governing power.
Right.
A republic is governed by the people, which is how it works.
Right.
We elect people to represent us. So we don't all have to walk into a meeting someday. But at the end of the day, it's our choice. Our opinion is what matters. And
Well, you just spend all that time saying that yours doesn't matter, dear.
I know, and that's the problem is we've fallen so far away from how we were found. This is why I hate politics.
Let's not talk about it anymore then.
All right, because it's just I could be pushed to a red line when talking about the stupidity of left versus right, and I could go on all day.
Okay.
So, but it is a wonderful idea, and I had never heard about this conspiracy theory until you started saying birds aren't real, birds aren't real. So I had to look it up, and that's why I did the story on it today, was because it's a wonderful, wonderful thought process that someone had the gumption to jump out there and fight stupidity of
With
this
stupidity.
with stupidity.
I think it's great. Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I love it. I'm totally going to get some Birds Aren't Real merch. It's happening.
I can see it happening.
I'm buying some for myself. Yeah.
Oh, I can see Annie going to school. Birds aren't real.
If we get big enough, I'm doing a collab, man.
Well, I don't think there'd be a collab in it, but yeah, because it'd just be an interview essentially.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right. So that was mine.
Okay. That was a good one. I forgot the word of the day this week.
Hey, at least it wasn't me this time.
The word of the day is stem winder.
Okay.
A watch wound by an inside mechanism turned by the knurled knob on the stem.
Oh.
One
Okay.
that is first rate of its kind, especially a stirring speech.
That doesn't make sense.
I know.
In
For
my-
context, the longest acceptance speech was Bill Clinton's 64.5 minute stem winder from 1996.
Oh. So this is okay.
Okay.
So it's using basically the noun as a adjective.
Yes.
Okay, now I get it. I'm tracking.
The stem winder is a watch wound by means of a stem, as opposed to the older method of winding with a key. The
Right.
stem winder was introduced to the marketplace in the late 19th century, and it wound up being such a hit with consumers that people soon turned to using the mechanism's name for exceptional people or things in general, including excellent speeches. Before stem winder referred to a kind of watch, it was used in colloquial English, especially in the western part of the United States,
Mhm.
as a word for a geared logging locomotive. Another name for such a locomotive is corkscrew.
Oh, okay.
Learn something new every day.
Yeah. I actually have a stem winder pocket watch, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my great grandfather's pocket watch that was passed down to me.
Nice. Nice.
And I not 100% sure, but I think the one that he bought me is also a stem winder. So my great grandfather was passed his was given a watch by his father. I want to say it was his father. Anyway, we all got a watch throughout the generations, and mine has a train on it. My dad's has a big truck on it and an eagle. He has two of them.
Okay.
But interesting. Fun fact there. Word of the day.
All right, babe. Tell them where they can find us now.
Well, let's see. Everywhere. No, we actually are on all podcasting platforms, and we have YouTube available. Everything can be found under This and That with Me and You.
And if you want to email us some suggestions or just chit chat or anything,
Mm-hmm.
you can email us at
Yeah.
tatwmay1
One.
at gmail.com. tatwmay1 at gmail.com.
Yep. It's been a while since I've said it because we've had some real technical difficulties and
Yeah,
stuff.
we had some hiccups. We learned that if I'm not fully prepared to record, then things go awry.
Yeah. That's for sure.
Like with the mics and other things.
Yeah, everything just kind of went off the hinges. So it's been a little while since we've recorded and trying to get everything back on track. So that being said, we're also recording back to back.
Yeah, we're recording 2 episodes back to back to try to catch up again.
Mm-hmm. So that's this week. Guess we'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye.